Greetings. My name is Letitia Hensley, and I'm the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools Director of Family and Community Engagement. We are excited that you are joining us today and know you will gain great insight from this session. At the conclusion of today's session, please provide feedback so that we can continue to support you with amazing sessions that will be provided throughout the year. Now, without further ado, we'll turn it over to our presenters.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Lunch and Learn, going over Exceptional Children 101. Welcome to Special Education Services. Just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone today. There is translation support. If you're not familiar with this platform, you can access that from the top right corner. Click Captions, click Show Live Captions, and then select your language from the drop down. How to engage, you will notice that there is no chat option within this platform. And so in the top right corner, you should see a Q&A button. And if you've got questions throughout, you are able to drop them into that question box. Those will be monitored, and we will have a time at the end of this webinar for a Q&A. You can also feel free to drop any reactions as we are moving through the information, and you can do that through the React. And give us thumbs up, give us some love, give some claps as we go through and we talk about special education services. So again, welcome. I am Cheryl Mandel. I am with the Exceptional Children Department as the Director for Preschool Services. And then we also have Corrine Shalafor with us, who will be presenting in a little bit. She's our Program Manager for Elementary Services, and Robin Portlock, who is our Program Manager for Autism. We do want to hear from you. Our Family and Community Engagement team wants to hear from you. So please share any feedback that you have for us. And when you do that, you will be entered into a raffle for a gift card, and that information will be coming out if you are the lucky winner via email on Friday, March 28th. There is the bit.ly there. This slide deck, or this slide, will also be at the end of our presentation if you need some help in grabbing that. So let's jump into our discussion about special education services. I want you guys to think about your experiences of when you've had great interactions, great conversations with schools, school teams, whether that be preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, whatever lens you're coming from, and think through your good interactions and what that looks like. And as you're thinking about that, think about also some of the questions that you might have when it comes to special education services and navigating the path to access those services. And then if your child is eligible for services, what that looks like moving forward. Please feel free to drop those in the Q&As. And as we finish up our information and our conversation, we will make sure that we circle back around to those. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about special education services within the school district. We're going to review Child Find, which is the beginning process related to special education, and then talk through the 5 steps of special education, starting with referral, moving to evaluation, discussing eligibility, developing the IEP if the child's eligible, and then that implementation and review of the IEP. Some common acronyms that we use in special education and that you will likely hear often include FAPE, which is the Free Appropriate Public Education, which is the guaranteed right to all students with disabilities. IEP, which is our Individualized Education Program. That's the plan for a student's special education needs. IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's the law that governs the education of students with disabilities. LRE is the Least Restrictive Environment which is a principle of IDEA that states students with disabilities should be educated in the least restrictive setting possible. And then LEA, which is the local education agency. So let's start with Child Find. So what is Child Find and who is covered by Child Find? Child Find is part of 2 federal laws, which mandates that schools locate, identify, and evaluate children and youth ages 3 through 21 years with suspected disabilities. So it covers our children within the district from birth through age 21, but in terms of special education services, specifically looks at those children ages 3 through 21. What help is available? As teams come together and discuss a child's suspected disability and need for special education, teams would look at a complete evaluation, and then if appropriate, if the child is eligible, an individualized education program for that child. The district's responsibility when a parent or guardian requests an evaluation for a child is, if it's an oral request, it is our obligation as the district to provide assistance in completing a written referral, and then the school holding a referral meeting to determine if data and information that we have for a child can lead to or should lead to an evaluation. If the IEP team chooses to evaluate the child, then the evaluations must be conducted and eligibility must be determined. And for an eligible child, an IEP developed within the 90 calendar days. The district's responsibility when someone other than a parent or guardian requests an evaluation is that within 30 days of receipt of that notification, that we connect with you as a parent to determine and decide what our next steps are for that child. So now we're going to read just a little infomercial about Child Find. Please enjoy.
Child Find. We are all responsible. What would you do if you thought your child may have a disability that impacts them academically, functionally, socially, or emotionally? Child Find is a continuous process to locate, identify, and evaluate children who may require early intervention, Section 504 support, or special education services. It is required of the school district by federal law. It is the responsibility of CMS to notify schools and the community of the Child Find process, and to also follow the process to identify any student with a disability or suspected of having a disability. All children birth to 21 years old are covered by our Child Find obligation. In addition to CMS students, this includes students who are homeschooled, attend private schools in Mecklenburg County, and students who are considered highly mobile, such as migrant or homeless students. Academic triggers for Child Find could include changes in grades, significantly low or lack of growth on measures of academic progress, end of grade or end of course assessments, and other measures, changes in attendance patterns, conversations and discussions during parent-teacher conferences, students not making adequate progress using MTSS. Behavioral triggers for Child Find could be multiple discipline incidents, lost instructional time due to behavioral or emotional difficulties, rating scales that show concern, individual health plans, emergency action plans, or other information from the school nurse, students receiving school-based mental health services, and students with communication delays. Some misconceptions include thinking a student with a 504 plan does not need an exceptional children evaluation, or that a student must go through the MTSS process before being considered for an evaluation, or that a student does not need EC or 504 services because they are passing their classes, or a parent says they are not interested in the services, therefore no further action is needed. If you suspect your child has a disability, you can request an evaluation by putting your request in writing. You should bring the request to either the Section 504 coordinator or the Exceptional Children Compliance Facilitator at your child's school in order for the support process to begin. When a student is identified as having or suspected of having a disability, the next step is to have a meeting with the parents to discuss the concerns. The team must determine whether an evaluation is needed. If an evaluation is conducted and the student is found eligible, then services will be provided based on that student's needs. If you have any questions about this information or your child specifically, please contact the Section 504 coordinator or the EC Compliance Facilitator at your child's school. Support is also available through the Section 504 Help Desk at 980-343-0001 or the EC Parent Liaison at 980-343-6960.
My mouse wasn't working there, everyone. Sorry about that. So, in terms of Child Find, if you suspect your child has a disability and you want more information regarding the special education services, if your child is pre-K through 12th grade attending a CMS school, you're going to want to contact your child's teacher and or the principal. If your child is preschool and not attending a CMS school, you'll contact our preschool Child Find. And if your child is school age but not attending a CMS school, you're going to want to contact the Exceptional Children Program in order to start that process. I'm going to turn it over now and allow my colleagues to move through the 5 steps of the special education process.
Hi, I'm Robin Portlock, the Autism Program Manager. Thank you, Cheryl. As Cheryl stated, if you are interested or have a belief that your child may have a disability, your first step would be to make a referral. You would request for an evaluation or a referral for special education. At that time, a team will meet, an IEP team will meet to review some basic information about your child, such as name, school, grade, etc. The IEP team will also review your child's strengths. There should be a general education teacher, a special education teacher, an LEA, yourself, and a person who can interpret results at these meetings. Therefore, everyone's input is important. The IEP team will discuss the reasons for the referral. What are the areas of concern? The IEP team will summarize what we know about your child. There may be information from classroom observations, attendance, behavior, discipline, test scores, any information that will help the team decide what is necessary to determine if your child needs to be evaluated or not. At that time, the IEP team will decide if it's necessary to conduct an evaluation. If an evaluation is determined to be needed, all formal evaluations require parental consent. So the team will agree that the child needs an evaluation. After that, a parent will be given a form to sign consent, giving permission for the evaluators to conduct the testing. As I mentioned earlier, who is part of the IEP team? There should be parents invited. You are a very integral part of your child's IEP team. At least one regular education teacher, a special education teacher, an LEA who is qualified and knowledgeable to help the team make decisions in regards to the referral process, an individual who can interpret the instructional implications of the evaluation results. This person may be an assessor, a psychologist, a speech therapist, a teacher. There are many people who can serve in this role. The other members that could be invited may be just other providers that have knowledge or special expertise regarding the child, including related service person, such as speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And then you as a parent are welcome to invite members to the team as well. Whenever appropriate, the child with the disability is highly encouraged to attend the meeting as well. There's a plethora of information that parents are asked to share at the referral meeting. It should start out with strengths, and this is all kinds of strengths, both academic strengths, daily living skills, how independent your child is, social and behavioral skills, study and work habits. Does your child do homework? Are they able to do the homework independently, or does it require your support as a parent? Is your child able to communicate? And what are your child's motor skill strengths? These are just a variety of strengths that could possibly be shared with the IEP team. And then they will also try to determine areas of concern. What are your child's areas of need? What areas at school are they performing in that you have concerns about? Are they having difficulty with a particular subject area? Is it related to behavior or social skills? Does your child have any health or medical problems that may impact their school performance? If there's something related to medical or health, any documentation that you can provide at that meeting would be extremely helpful. Again, is your child having difficulty with communication or motor skills, studying, getting work done, anything regarding basic needs or daily living skills such as toileting, feeding, and dressing, and just overall concerns you have about your child's participation at school. Next is the evaluation. Once the IEP team determines that an evaluation is going to be conducted and the parent has given permission, it is time for the assessors to assess the student needs. Here are the 14 areas of eligibility: autism, deafblindness, deafness, developmentally delayed, emotional disability, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment. So these are the areas of disability areas that your child could qualify. Each one of these areas has required assessments that must be completed and criteria that must be met in order for your child to be found eligible for these services. But an IEP team can determine what tests are most appropriate depending on those areas of concern and strengths and the suspected disability that the team is looking at. Once testing is completed, eligibility is determined to determine if the child qualifies for special education services. You will again be invited to an IEP meeting where all of those representatives should be present at the table. The evaluators will share results of all the evaluations conducted, and you will have time to ask questions. All team members will consider the different areas of eligibility, including the impact of the disability on your child's education, and does your child have a need for specially designed instruction? If the IEP team determines that your child is eligible, they will determine a primary area of disability, one of those 14 areas discussed earlier. The team may consider a secondary area of disability based on the eligibility areas you discussed earlier in the meeting. As a member of the IEP team, you will be answering these 3 questions using all the information gathered during the evaluation step. Does your child meet criteria for one or more of the 14 disabling conditions? Does the disability have an adverse effect on educational performance? And does the disability require specially designed instruction? You can see below the 3 prongs. Student meets criteria for one of the 14 areas. There's evidence of an adverse effect on the child's education and the need for specially designed instruction. All 3 of these must be met in order for a child to meet eligibility. I am going to turn it over to Corinne.
Hey everyone, I'm Corinne Shalafor. I am the Elementary Program Manager, and I want to talk to you a little bit about IEPs. IEPs we consider to be a living document, and by that it means it can be modified and changed at any point. It's the letters stand for Individual Education Program, and that's because it is highly individualized for your child and for their specific educational needs. So I'm going to go through a little bit about what all the factors are. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and share them in the Q&A so that we can make sure we address your specific questions. As we're going through the IEP, the first thing we always want to do is talk about your child's overall strengths. Every child has strengths, and we want to make sure we're coming from that standpoint of what can your child do, not just focusing on what can't they do. The next really important piece is to talk about their needs and your concerns, your specific concerns for right now, and where do you want them going? Where do you see them ending up when they're an adult? So as you're preparing for an IEP meeting, you might want to jot some notes down and come with just notes on what are you most concerned about right now, and what are you concerned about for the future, and what are your goals for your child's future. We then go through what we call the consideration of special factors. And these are all those little things that may impact your child's ability to access the educational environment or the curriculum, but that aren't necessarily their disability. So things like behavior, if there's any additional medical concerns, if there's going to be any transitions in your family, there's a lot of questions that we ask that are sort of side factors, but that could have big impacts on how we design our instruction. The next thing we go through are assessment results. And this is both the results that Robin just talked about, those big formal assessments, but then also smaller assessments. If there's any district assessments they've participated in, like the iReady or the MVPA, and then classroom assessments as well. That should all be brought in there because what we want to see is how are they performing right now and what progress have they made. We take all of that data and then we craft what we call a present level of academic and functional performance. And this is a statement that talks about what is the child doing, what are their strengths, what are their needs, and what impact is it having on their educational performance. From there, we craft goals that we want to make sure are measurable. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. After that, we look at what are the services that your child needs in order to make progress towards those goals. Then we look at accommodations and modifications. Those are those things like extended time or do they need preferential seating? We go through all of that to see what needs to be accommodated or modified in order to help them be successful in the classroom. And finally, we talk about extended school year services. Extended school year services are, it's not summer school. It's different than that. And they're services designed for students who, if they take the whole summer break without any services, their ability to access their education the following school year will be dramatically negatively impacted. So again, it's not summer school. It's not just a continuation of services. It's really designed for students who, if they take that summer break, will have a drastic negative impact the following fall. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about present levels of performance, goals, and services. If you look from this graphic, you can see that they should feed from each other. So what that means is that your goals are going to be based off your present levels of performance, and your services are going to be based off your goals. So your present levels of performance should be very specific. When you're looking at them, they should include data, which should have numbers. As a parent, if it includes so much data and you don't understand the numbers, please speak up and ask for that to be explained in present level in a way that makes sense to you. We do want the numbers because teachers know what those numbers mean, right? But we also want to make sure that you understand what the numbers mean. And after that initial eligibility meeting, as you're going through, more and more of the data is going to be what we call informal data. It's going to be from those district assessments or classroom assessments. After we have a good picture of what your child can do and where they need to grow, that's where we develop goals. So your goals should build directly from the areas of need identified in the present level of performance. And we want them to be measurable. So rather than saying we want them to improve in reading, we want to say something like they will improve on reading these types of syllables, or will learn to answer these types of comprehension questions with a specific percentage of improvement. So the teacher should be able to read the goal and see what the measurable area is and be able to answer yes or no, has that goal been met? So if you're reading a goal and you don't think that if at the end of the year that can be answered as a yes or no, can the goal be met? We maybe need to make it a little more specific. After we craft all of our goals, that's when we want to look at services. So what do we need in order to help your child meet their goals? So this is what we call specially designed instruction. And what that means is it's instruction that is different from what happens just to general education students, just in the general education environment. We also, by law, are required to keep students in what we call the least restrictive environment. And what that means is having them removed from their non-disabled peers for as little time as possible. So sometimes we can have a special education teacher go right into the general education classroom and help come alongside students and help them learn in that environment. Oftentimes we need to have them come out of the classroom for a short period of time to receive instruction via a special program or a special methodology in order to make progress towards those goals. And then for other students, they actually need a separate special education classroom where their entire day is specially designed instruction because their needs are so significant. But we want to make sure that we're serving students on that continuum where they're with their regular peers as much as possible. Okay, so after the IEP is fully crafted, that's when we want to talk about implementing and reviewing it. So your IEP dates, and you'll always see this on the first page of your IEP, the IEP dates are listed for when the IEP starts and ends. We never have the IEP start the day we're crafting it. We always give families at least one day, but usually a few more than that, to go home, read over it, think about it, and be able to come back with questions. It also, we want to give a few extra days if we're making any significant changes so that schools have time to plan and make those changes so that they can be implemented well from the start, and also give kids a few days to prepare for the transition if it's a big transition. It also lists when the IEP ends. An IEP has to be reviewed at least once every 364 days. So your end date may be essentially the day before you met, but a year in the future. So if we had an IEP meeting today, the start date might be 3/7/2025, but the end date could not be any later than March 5th, 2026. That would be 364 days from the day we reviewed it. However, we can date an IEP out shorter. So just say we're not sure about what changes we're making, if they're really the best changes. So we want to try them, but we want to make sure we come back and make sure we made good decisions. We can date that IEP out for 3 months or 6 months or whatever the team decides is the right amount of time, so that we come back and we look at what we've put in there sooner. Also, either a parent or any other team member can request that the IEP team come together sooner and relook at the IEP, especially if there's a reason that it needs to be modified. So reasons it might need to be modified is if a child is not passing their classes. We don't want to wait until the end of a semester, especially for our older students, before looking if we need to do anything to help them pass those classes. If there are big changes in circumstances, either in your family or in school, that could be a reason to come back and have an IEP meeting. If there's a big change in your child's behavior or mood, we want to come together and see, do we have to put any additional supports in there to help your child be successful? Or if there's new data to review, if there's been new testing or even some informal or district assessments have come in that kind of surprised us, and we want to review that data and decide if we need to make any changes. Those are all good reasons to have an IEP meeting before it's due at the end of a full calendar year.
So those were the 5 big steps of accessing special education services, starting with the referral, moving through evaluations to eligibility to development of the IEP, and on into that implementation and provision of services. Some additional information we want to make sure that is shared is that IEP team meeting is where the IEP is developed and written. School-based teams may come with recommendations, you as parents may come with recommendations, but the actual meeting is where the formal plan is discussed, agreed upon, and written and finalized. Your teachers who are providing the services and or your related service providers are the ones who are going to be tracking those short-term and long-term goals and reporting back on progress that the child is making. And so they will be the ones that are taking the data in order to be able to discuss and speak to how the specially designed instruction that is being provided is being successful or not being successful with your child. The document itself, the IEP document, specifies the services that will be provided to the student. What the IEP team does not do and what the document does not do is specify specific programs, technology, or personnel that will be providing the services. And it's always important to remember that at any time throughout the life of an IEP or the life of a child's special education services, that the child's going to need to be reevaluated. As Corrine spoke to, things change, children's needs change, and so there will come times throughout the life of the child's services that we need to get together and gain some additional documentation or data through formal and informal assessments to better inform the services that are being provided. There are a lot of resources available to you as parents. CMS's on the Exceptional Children page via CMS, there are resources around child find, around the referral meeting, around eligibility, reevaluation, and the IEP team meeting. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction has an office for exceptional children, and via there, they have the policies governing services for children with disabilities, and as well as parents' rights and responsibilities in special education. Each state is also required to have a parent assistance center. We are very lucky in Charlotte that our parent resource center is actually located in Davidson, and it's the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, ECAC. ECAC does have a plethora of resources that are available to families as they navigate the special education process. So with that, just a reminder to everybody that we do want your feedback. And so if you provide that via that bit.ly, there is the opportunity to be entered into a raffle for a $100 gift card, and information about that will be coming out on Friday, March 28th, if you were selected. And then I believe we are moving into our Q&A. So were there any questions that came up that we are able to answer?
Hey, this is Corinne. There are several questions in the Q&A, and I thought we might just start working from the bottom up. So the first one that came in was about students who are considered 2E or twice exceptional. And that is when students are considered to be both gifted and have some sort of learning difference or disability. And this is a great question, because oftentimes it seems like kids whose brain develops a whole lot in one way, it kind of maybe doesn't develop quite so much in another way. So we see a lot of students with giftedness who will also have difficulties with executive functioning, ADHD, but sometimes also we have kids who are like super gifted in reading and really struggle in math or that kind of thing. So our district does absolutely recognize that. So our department, the special education department or exceptional children department, we focus on the students who have the learning disabilities. And then there is the talent development department that focuses on that giftedness. So there are really two different departments and two different teachers at each school. However, they should work collaboratively, and each school does have both of those resources. So we have a lot of students who get services both from the gifted teachers and from the teachers who address special education. The part of the question was, do we see profound giftedness as a learning difference? So yes and no. So it's not considered a learning difference that the special education department handles. Again, it's one that the talent development does. But we do have a school for kids with superbly profound giftedness, and there are students even at that school who also have an IEP. And all students who have that talent development designation should be receiving a plan that monitors them and helps their learning be specialized. Sometimes it's that they're given different approaches or that they get extra activities. And I don't just mean extra work, but they'll work with that gifted teacher to do projects or activities that push their learning past what is expected just with the general curriculum. I hope I answered your question with that. It's a great question. The next question was, can the IEP eligibility have more than two categories? And yes, Cheryl addressed that at the beginning. There's two different ways that happens. The most typical way is for students who have a primary area of disability and a secondary area of disability. So that would be a student who, let's say, had a specific learning disability in reading, which really impacted their ability to learn how to read. You might call it dyslexia. But then they also have a diagnosis of ADHD that is also impacting their ability to function in the classroom with executive functioning, paying attention. So they may have both a learning disability primary and then secondary and other health impairment for that ADHD. The other way that happens is what we call a multiple disability. And this is really for students who have really significant disabilities and where we can't tease out which disability is more impactful than the other. So a lot of times this will be a significant cognitive disability with also a significant visual impairment or hearing impairment, something to that effect. That's much more uncommon, but yes, IEPs can absolutely address more than one disability category, and they should if there is more than one that is significantly impacting your child's ability to access their education. I can keep talking, or Robin or Cheryl, if you want to jump in, I can let you do that as well. The next question, so feel free to jump in if you want, but the next question is, who do you obtain performance data and goals from? And this would be the special education teacher at your school. You would want to give them some time to get you the goal, the data. They most likely are not going to give you their raw data, meaning the data that they're like informally writing it down on, because that most likely would not make sense to a parent. So this is why you want to give them, a couple of days so that they can consolidate the data in a way that makes sense towards the IEP goal. But that absolutely does come from your special education teacher. And then the next one we have two about retention, one about end of grades and just one who decides it. I will say that the special education department, the special education teacher, and the IEP in general have nothing to do with promotion retention. That is really what we consider an administrative decision. So it's something that your principal, in collaboration with the performance area, make. So for students who don't pass their EOG, who are in those years where 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, where it's important that they pass those EOGs, the IEP does not decide whether or not they're retained. However, we do take into consideration, or the principal will take into consideration, if they have a disability, and if so, are they making appropriate progress towards their goals when they're considering if retention is really in the best interest of your child. Okay, I'll keep going. The next question was, are we able to request accommodations for one-on-one sessions versus group for outside of the class IEP instruction? You can request anything at any time. And as a parent, you will always be your child's best advocate. However, I'm going to throw it back to the fact that we are responsible for providing a free, appropriate public education. So we have to look at what is the most appropriate way to provide that public education to your child. And often that is not in a one-on-one session. It is going to be in a less restrictive session where your child is interacting with other students in both their specially designed instruction time and in their time with their general education peers. There are times that having some one-on-one instruction is appropriate, but that's something you'll need to decide as the IEP team. But again, you're always your child's best advocate. I don't want you to ever be afraid to ask if something is appropriate, but just also be aware that we're going to be looking at what is the best way to provide that free, appropriate public education in a way that is the least restrictive environment for your child. And the data should also be looked at when making those decisions. So is appropriate progress being made with the services as they're being implemented? And then the next one, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm happy to give you a break for a second. Yes, I'm happy to answer the next question. So the question is, does the teacher provide two separate progress reports, one for the progress of the student within their IEP and one for their regular grades? The child should be receiving a progress report in relation to the gains that they are making in regards to their goals. So a progress report for their IEP. And then if the child is school age, they would also then be receiving, in addition to that, their report card, which is their quarterly report in regards in relation to their progress that they are making within their general education core curriculum. Let me scroll. What is an LEA and where can parents access them? So the LEA is the local education agency, and so that is essentially the school district. The LEA representative, who is part of the IEP team, as mentioned before, is going to be a person who sits as the are part of the team who can help facilitate the discussion and make decisions with the team in regards to the services. Oftentimes, you will see that as one of your administrators in your building. Let me scroll. Question is out there about how do we find additional information on extended school year services. If that is a service that your IEP team determines your child requires, then that would be done through that IEP team meeting. And if the child is eligible for that service, then information would be given at that time. A question about a child's IEP ends in April. Your school team should be reaching out to you to schedule that meeting within the next several weeks. I'm scrolling through, parents, getting to the new posts. So a question is out there about how often do you as a parent meet with the IEP team? So as Corrine discussed, you meet at least once annually, but if you as a parent or if the school-based team has any concerns and feels the need to review and possibly revise the IEP anytime during that year, a meeting can be called. Who is on that team? Every IEP team would need to consist of you as the parent, the LEA, the at least one regular education teacher, and at least one special education teacher would be a part of that meeting. If you have concerns and you would like to schedule a meeting sooner than the annual review, you'd want to reach out to your teacher, your child's teacher, your child's special education teacher to go ahead and request that meeting. Robin or Crean, mine is not loading very quickly. Do you guys scrolling through any of the other Q&As?
I can go ahead and take a shot. We have a question about, is it possible to have an outside provider, such as a behavioral therapist, provide services in the school? And if so, what does that process look like? CMS does not allow outside private providers to come into the school district per board policy. However, we do love to collaborate with those individuals, so you are welcome to invite them to your IEP meeting as a person who can advocate and help the team with your child's strengths and needs and goals. Additionally, if that person would like to do an observation with your permission, you can contact the school and set up an observation at a specified time for a specified length of time. And it truly is an observation, not a time to engage with your student or other students or the teacher. You're truly there for an observation. If you feel like there are some behaviors that are not being addressed, I would highly recommend that you request that your IEP team convene to determine what type of services that can be provided in school so that your child can make progress. There's another one here about a parent requesting a personal needs assistant. That is something that any IEP team can consider with the data available. Sometimes students require additional support from a personal needs assistant, depending on the amount of time in their day that is being dedicated to having to transition, behavior, toileting, feeding. Various things are taken into consideration in addition to the staffing in that school. So that is possible to look at. Again, it would be an IEP team decision. Additionally, if your child has certain medical needs that require a higher skilled level person, we do a nursing assessment as part of a reevaluation process or eligibility process to determine if your child may require such as a CNA, an LPN, an RN, or someone like that in order for your child to access their school environment. How often does the cognitive assessment done for an already existing IEP? As stated before, a parent is welcome to convene an IEP team at any point if they have concerns, as well as other members of the IEP team. But our students are automatically looked at for a triannual review every 3 years. So your team should sit down and consider all of the data and determine if additional and current and relevant assessments are necessary to continue eligibility to determine services or related services. So that will automatically happen every 3 years, but again, you as a parent can initiate at another time if you feel that it is time. Here's one in here about what is your child experiencing mental paralysis? I would go back to the beginning of the presentation where Cheryl talked about Child Find and the referral process, and immediately get in contact with someone from your school or from the Exceptional Children's Department so that we can look at the needs of your child and those strengths and determine is a referral, well, you could make a referral or determine if an evaluation is necessary at this time.
So I'll hop in and answer a couple. One is our times outside of the classroom monitored, such as lunch and recess. So when the IEP team is looking at services, part of what they also look at is when are our students with disabilities participating in the general education day? And that includes our non-instructional times, such as lunch and recess and assemblies and our specials classes like art, music, PE. And so I don't know if I don't know exactly what you mean by monitored, but they are considered as part of our school day and our times that we, if possible, want our students with disabilities participating with their non-disabled peers. For the retention questions, I know there's a few, and I know as parents, we all have kids, so we know that this is a really stressful thing, and it's a hard thing to know what to do in terms of retention when your kids are not making progress. They really are, decisions about retention are made outside of the IEP team. So I'm going to direct you back to your school-based administrators and ask you to have that question with them because they're really the ones who understand it best and are going to be responsible for making that decision with you. There's another question about, can tutors come to the IEP meeting? As a parent, you are welcome to bring anybody you want with you to an IEP team. So that could be tutors, it could be an advocate, it could be other family members. And sometimes it's really helpful to have those people come with you to share any data that they have. Sometimes it's helpful to have another family member with you just to have another pair of ears and eyes at the meeting. What we do ask, though, is if you are bringing anybody who is associated with any sort of legal entity, whether they be an advocate or a lawyer for any reason, that you let us know ahead of time so that we can see if we have to have counsel there. Oftentimes we don't, but we just need to I don't want anybody to be caught in a situation where the meeting has to be canceled because we weren't aware of who's coming. But again, you're welcome to bring anybody with you who you think will be helpful to the IEP team in making decisions. In turn, can we provide specially designed instruction after school hour instead of in school? So The short answer is no. We are required to provide our specially designed instruction during the school day. That is a great question, but our services are provided within the school day. There are times that we provide things like compensatory education if for some reason there was a loss of instruction outside of the school day, but by and large, all services are provided during the school day.
Robin, there was a question regarding services for children with autism. Do you want to address that one?
Sure. So as any other student with a disability, we would look at the continuum of services and determine whether your child needs that support at the regular level of service, predominantly with their gen ed peers, but still getting those supports towards their goals, in addition to any accommodations or modifications that are necessary. There is also the resource level of service where students may be pulled out of the general education environment for a period of time and taught by a special education teacher in a special education environment with other special education students. We also have separate self-contained placements that are within the school. But the students are predominantly in a classroom with other special education students taught by a special education teacher, and there may be additional supports as well. Here in CMS, we have a K-2 developmental classroom. We also have an extensions classroom, and we have a specialized behavior support classroom. Additionally, we have separate schools for our very intensive students, which would be Metro School for our students with significant cognitive disabilities, and that may include autism, as well as Charlotte-Mecklenburg Academy for students with significant behaviors. And again, that may include autism. So you would look at the full continuum depending on the level of needs and support your student with autism requires would determine which special education program they would utilize. And again, it's an IEP team decision.
The last one that came in was about, are there free advocates that CMS provides for families? CMS does not provide family advocates for special education meetings. We do have a parent liaison who is available to answer questions that you have, and we encourage you to call her if you have specific questions. There are several groups in the Charlotte metro region that provide either free or very low cost advocacy. And I would encourage you to look for them. One is the Autism Society, if you have a child with autism, and there are a few others that I don't know how to get in touch with them specifically, but I think if you were to put them in a quick search engine, they probably pop up pretty quick.